We're currently halfway through the year, so you guys know what we have to do. We need to figure out which teams are the worst and which teams are the best heading into the second half of the CDL season. And I haven't done this in a while, but I will do it in this video, guys. We are close to 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you guys do rock with the kid, I'd appreciate it if you could hit the sub button. But anyways, to the tier list. By now, you guys know how we do this. We're gonna start with the D tier. The worst team in the league for me, and the only team that is going to be in the D tier, is the Minnesota Rocker. Now, this team has tried a bunch of different things to help improve their roster. They swapped Major Maniac out. They had Attach running the main AR. They had Priester running the main AR. It doesn't matter. Role swaps aren't going to do anything for this team. A one-player move isn't going to do anything for this team. I've been saying it. They need a major haul. They need a multiple player swap if they want any chance of improving to the point where they could even contend for a championship this year. They're just not good. Moving to the C tier, we're going to have two teams here now. And I'm proud of this one team because I do think that they are trending upwards. And that team is going to be the Paris Legion. Now, Paris for most of the year has been one of, if not the worst team in the league. The Paris Legion have been competitive. They've been a lot more competitive than a couple other teams, even though they just don't have any success in actually winning these series and getting some pro points. But they've been trending upwards. And I think at the Pro-Am, we really saw Tom Gravity start to, get into his own in the league. They beat LAG 3-2. They beat Toronto Academy North America. There's like three of them, 3-1. They lost to Boston 3-1 in a relatively close series. And that was probably going to go to a game 5. There was some technical issues with the PC, or Temp's account got signed out. He had streaks, reset, yada, yada, yada. But I do think that they are improving with this roster. I do. It may not be a big jump, but I can't put them in the D tier. I don't think they are as bad as the Minnesota Rocket currently. And then joining them, we have the opposite. We have a team that I had very high in the beginning of the year. I thought that they were going to be a consistent top team. And they've just been falling off a cliff ever since the exhibition in the beginning of the year. It's the Seattle Surge. This team went to the Pro-Am and they didn't even win a respawn against any team that didn't make it out of pool play. I don't know what's wrong with this team because they have some great players on the team, but they're all wildly inconsistent. Like, this team has a very high ceiling. The only issue is it's extremely hit or miss. One series they're playing the Atlanta FaZe, they look great, they're beating them. Then they go to the Pro-Am and they can't win a respawn even against a challenger team. It doesn't add up for me. I think that their style of play is it's inconsistency. That's what it does. It breeds inconsistency. And they have some star players. I mean, Mac, Pred, and Sib are all star players in this league. But if you don't have any sort of consistency, it doesn't matter. So I do hope that they could turn it around. But right now, I don't know. I don't know if I can have them in the same tier as a lot of these other teams, just because they have consistently been getting worse as the year has went on. Now, moving on to the B tier, this is where it gets interesting because there's a whole bunch of teams. And so I'm just going to go through and kind of do this in a rapid fire way because it's literally most of the league. Starting with the B tier, we have the Florida Mutineers. We all know about them. They're kind of in the same boat as the Seattle Surge, but they've been more consistent as of late in their placings. And I do think that they've been improving their game. They still have one big weakness, and no disrespect, but for me, it's got to be Dave Patty. The guy constantly has got the lowest number of engagements on his team. He's got the lowest number of engagements in the league. And it's not like he's getting shit on. He's got a very good shot. And he ends these series with above a 1.0 KD. Like, he has one of the best KDs in the league. The only issue is every series I look and watch, I can just see the mini map, and he's really not moving around, not being as impactful as I think he could be. And then I look at the stats, and he's got the lowest kills, the lowest deaths on his team, damn near every single series. I don't know if he can run a sub, but they might need to try and pick up a more aggressive player and have Skies be the main AR or Awakening. Like, it doesn't matter, but that is the one issue I have with Florida. Well, that's one of the two. The other is they are wildly inconsistent, and we've seen that. But moving on. Next, we have the Boston Breach. This team has been rock solid all year long. The only issue is they can't beat a top team. Like, going into this event, If they were going up against a Minnesota, going up against a Paris, going up against a Seattle, I mean, even an NYSL before the Pro and before we saw what they did, I would pick Boston 10 out of 10 times. The only issue is, though, I haven't seen Boston beat any good teams, and I just don't know if they can do it. It's almost like they have a mental block, and they're kind of like the contender gatekeepers. Like, they're not going to actually ever win a chip together, but if you can't beat Boston Breach, then your team's not going to win a chip either. After Boston, we have Toronto Ultra. Now, this team was a team that was like 2-17 in hardpoint. They couldn't win a hardpoint versus anyone in the league. And I think that they're starting to turn around. They're starting to get on the right path. They looked great in the Pro-Am. They honestly could have been in the finals. In the semifinals versus NYSL, they choked the series. They choked that control. It would have been done and dusted if they won that game. We know how good this Toronto Ultra team can be. We've seen them in the past. I think maybe they just had to get out of this rut that they were in. They were starting to get in their own heads, losing confidence, but they look good at the Pro-Am. So I'm excited to see how they start the qualifiers off in Major 3. But I have them amongst, the big group of teams in the B tier where any one of them can beat any one of them on a given day. LA Thieves also is going to be joining the B tier. Now, this team in the last power rankings video I made, I had them in the C tier. They did a role swap. And while I saw people saying Kenny, isn't doing it on a sub, he's not moving people on a sub. He had a rough series versus NYSL in the first series that they played in the tournament. But the team looks completely different in Respawn with Kenny. I think a lot of it just comes down to his pacing, his communication, and just the way he moves around and opens up the map for his team, whether or not he's getting those kills. Now, I do think that he will continue to get better as he gets more comfortable on this sub role. But they just got second at the Pro-Am, okay? And they beat some very solid teams along the way. So I have to give them their credit. I was honestly thinking about bumping them up to A, but I thought that was probably just pushing a little too far for the time being. Then we have the last two teams in the B tier. The first one's going to be the London Royal Ravens, and I don't know what's going on with London. Okay, I know Gizmo had to take a step back. He was dealing with some personal issues. They scooped up Harry. They didn't look good at the Pro-Am, and they didn't look good at last major either. I don't know what the issue is. They did beat the challenger team at the Pro-Am, but they lost to LAT and New York, and the series just weren't really that competitive in my opinion. I think that they are maybe having some role issues. Maybe they just need a little bit more time with Harry. But London is slightly regressing from the beginning of the season, so I have to put them in the B tier. And then lastly, this team is actually a team that has won an event this year, and it's the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Now, I had to give them, their respect after winning the major when I did the last tier list, but I kind of called it. And I normally do call it, I don't hit every time, but I'm shooting at a very high clip, very efficiently with the calls, the takes that I have. LAG had a Cinderella story, okay? It was a miracle that they won the major. They could have won the major with Gunless that way. They could have won the major with me that way. And it's no disrespect to Spart, because I think Spart played great. Well, maybe not great. I think he played very well, though, at the Pro-Am. But it's like, come on. The cards were falling their way over and over at that major. They didn't really have any convincing wins besides the finals, okay? Besides the finals versus FaZe, but getting there, they easily could have been out in the second round. And while I do think that they still are a good team, they went to the Pro-Am, didn't win a series. This is a team that had just won the last major, didn't win a series, even against the challenger team. They got reverse swept. And I'm kind of surprised because I did have them making the bracket, but at the same time, I'm not, because they weren't some disgusting team before they won Major 2. And they kind of got lucky at Major 2. I do still think they're better than how they performed at the Pro-Am, but for right now, they're just in that big clump of teams. And then going to the A tier, we have one team. That's going to be the Pro-Am champions, New York Subliners. Now, some of you guys may think that this is a very, very, very overrated team or a very hot take. You might say it's a Mickey Mouse tournament, blah, blah, blah. Well, look, I'm gonna say one thing. This was as close as a legitimate tournament as you possibly can get to. Now, I know the bracket play was single elimination, but we had every pro team there. We even had the best challengers teams there. We even had pool play. Like, these teams were playing multiple series. multiple series on land in that environment, and NYSL looked great. I know they had 4 round 11 wins. They went 4-0 in round 11s, and all those came in the second map because they didn't go to one map 5 at the Pro-Am. They beat LAT 3-0, War 3-1, London 3-0, Paris 3-0, Toronto 3-1, LAT 3-1. What this tells me is they beat a solid base of teams. They beat LAT twice. They beat a London team who I think is solid right now. They have been regressing. They beat a Toronto team who I think is the opposite. They're solid as well, but they are on an upward trend. But the biggest thing for me is not only did they win the Pro-Am, they did it very convincingly. I thought that they looked great in all 3 modes. I thought the team looked great with the pickup of Kismet. Do I think that they can carry this on and maybe win the 3rd major? It's too early to tell, okay, in my opinion. But I have to give respect to NYSL. This is the first time we saw this roster with Kismet, and they pretty much ran through everyone. I know they didn't have to play FaZe. I know they didn't have to play Optic, but that's why I have them in the A tier. And if you haven't guessed by now, there's still 2 teams in the S tier, and that's going to be the Atlanta FaZe and the Optic Texas. This is where it gets interesting though. Optic Texas is going to be playing this week's matches with ProLoot. They picked up ProLoot from Challengers because Illy still cannot play with his thumb. I don't know what exactly the issue is and if he needs to get surgery or just rest or whatever the case may be. But these are the 2 most consistent teams by far. I know neither of them made the finals. Obviously, Optic had a sub with General, and Atlanta FaZe, they didn't look great. But at the end of the day, when you look at these rosters through and through, Optic's gotten what? A 1st, a 4th, a 6th or 5th, 6th. And Atlanta's gotten a 2nd, and a, what, 7th, 8th, I think, at the Pro-Am. But when you compare to every other team with their current rosters, right? So we're not comparing NYSL in the beginning of the year to now because they had a completely different team. But all the teams that have stayed the same, or at least have some reps with the full team, these 2 teams are still the best. And if I had a bet on any team, if I was a betting man, well, I am, but you know, besides, it's not the point. I would have one of these 2 teams in the finals. Now, I don't know when Illy's coming back, but for the time being, I still have Optic Texas there. We have to see, because maybe he's back next week's matches, or maybe he doesn't even play at this next major. We just have to find out. But that is my tier list, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. As always, I appreciate the support, man. For real, all of you guys that show love on every video, it means a lot to me. Until next time.